someone had requested an update again, and recently did a couple at a couple events. Placed third in a 43-man tournament for a case of megatins. At locals, we lost. Placed second twice, losing the Winnematte to Larson, of course. So we're gonna just do a brief update. It's not too different. There's some changes in the side and some small changes in the main because of new acquisitions, but we'll get into it. So, starting as usual, we have our normal summon and engine requirement of Aqua Dolphin. Neo Space Connector is insane. He literally is the reason why Infernoble is still pretty good, because hand knowledge is everything. Even if you just looking at your opponent's hands, seeing what hand traps there are, you can start to plan around it, and that makes all the difference half the time. Now, I've done this, had only 1 or 2 extenders, and saw a handful of with 2 ashes and an ash and 2 drolls, and had no extenders. But he didn't ash the Neo Space Connector, so I ripped the ash with an Aqua Dolphin, didn't use the Search on Isolde, was still able to put up a Charles and a Herald to stop my opponent, and that was enough to handle it and take the win that time. Alright, moving on, we have our 5th normal summon in Infernoble Knight Ogier. She's still extremely relevant. The anti-Nibiru combo line kind of requires her. She also can do things like send an Oliver to a grave, so you can use Oliver to equip, and then suddenly you don't have to waste an equip spell in hand. You can just use, to special an Oliver in hand, you can instead just use the equip on the field that you sent. Following up, we have our extenders. We play 3 red layer. He's amazing. In tight situations where your combo is start, turn 2, it's him plus an Oliver, gets you straight into Charles. He has that cycle back ability that can be very useful in drawn out games. Makes him good discard fodder as well. We play 3 Olivers. Once upon a time I was only on 2, but he's just the best extender. He can come out without requiring any field presence, which is very useful. He modulates himself to level 1, which means that he can be used to make an early Herald with Aqua Dolphin. He also makes sure monsters untargetable when he's equipped to them. So him plus Metal Silver is a soft lock on targeting monsters. Moving on, we play 2 Renaud. We tried him at 3 for a while, but I just noticed that I was seeing him too much and the only options to start my plays. And unfortunately, you really don't want to use him as his extension until you're into combo. If you use them before, it gets really hard to put up an impressive end board, and you're more and more likely to lose. You still are on 2 just because he is a combo requirement, and he is a big part of your turn 3 plans if your board does get broken. Him and Gearfried, that is. The other big problem he has is he has to have a Fire Warrior on field to special summon himself out. So if you, say, get to the Isolde step and he's the only extender you have left, and you get ashed on Isolde, you're in trouble. You're in a lot of trouble. Moving on, we have, to round out just the extenders, 2 Fireflint Ladies. Very useful. She specs herself as long as you have a warrior, so she works at the Isolde step. She can also tribute herself to special out a different one. So if you see her and say Genba, or you see her and you have an extra Oliver in hand, you can special out a tuner extender that way by specialing her and then using her effect attribute and special out that tuner, saving Oliver for later. Okay, now, not technically extenders, sometimes in very rough situations you might have to use them, but he's also our main deck boss monster in Mortal Phoenix Gearfried. We're using the collector's rare now because we finally picked it up. He's insanely strong in a simplified game strike. He outs Dragoon like a boss. Is there something on the field to swing at, including Dragoon itself? Cool. That Dragoon's an equip spell now. He's helps you break boards very well too, because as long as there's multiple monsters on board, he's clearing out at least 2 of them. A good reminder, the equip spell that he sends does not have to be equipped to him, so you can easily protect his summon by putting an equip spell on a different monster, so that when he hits the field, your opponent can't just go for a pop on him. Well, a monster effect pop on him. Moving on, we have some of our bricks in Genba. We've moved him back to having him in the deck just because having that 2-star tuner helps set up the old combo line better. So you can actually have something like a Herald or Gearfried out to protect yourself from hand traps and still put out a Charles and a Herald. He's also useful for level modulation with our Shooting Riser. 2-star, so you can send it to make Shooting Riser a 5-star. So if your lines gets a little messed up and you know what to do, you can send him and suddenly Shooting Riser is a 5-star. Plus a token means it's you got a 8-star synchro, so you can rip with Omega, or if you have just Colt Wing left at that point, you can send this and use Colt Wing and Shooting Riser to make Charles. Colt Wing. This thing puts up an insane amount of work. We're on the Dracosat combo line, so probably special it out 4 times. Tokens. 001. You don't want to see it in hand, but it's not the end of the world if it's in there. He's also pretty useful for OTKing as well, because he gains attack for all the machine monsters on the field, including himself. In a full field of tokens, Colt Wing, Auroradon, or Dracosac. He's sitting at 35, and that's a significant amount of damage. If you're seeing an empty board, you can honestly, or swinging it into an empty board, you can honestly just make Colt Wing, Dracosac, and have Auroradon out with 3 tokens, and that is game. To finish up our monsters, we have our hand traps. We only play 3 Drone Lockbirds. This might be changing soon. We have to see how it works out against Sword Soul and Flenderies, because they're coming into the meta and things are going to start shifting. But for this, until Bode released, it was a good hand trap that hit most decks. It's at least had an effect on Tri-Brigade. It was very strong against Drytron, you know, besides the fact that they just made a Dragoon after. Alright, moving on to our spells. We play 1 Rhoda. For warriors, you have to play Rhoda. It's an extra Neospace connector, but it's also an extra copy of an extender. If you have to use Durandal and you have Rhoda in hand, you can still use it to get your Renaud, so you can still play your combo. We then play one out of order always. We play 3 Heritage. Again, another option to search out your tuner extenders in Renaud and Oliver. It can also, in a pinch, be used to grab Durandal, and then Durandal to catch or grab your red layer. You normally don't want to do that, but sometimes the situation calls for it. The other big thing is it can search out your other noble arms. So in game states where you're looking at a Winda, this plus the Gallatin that we also play gives 1,000 attack boost to your monsters. Gets Ogier over Winda, it gets red layers over Winda. There we go. Next, our favorite spell, Durandal. You have to play 3 copies for the power tool, and even if you didn't have power tool, you want 3 copies because it's your not search. It's a search for an Oliver. It's a search for red layer for just a big or a moderate-sized beat stick. There is a secondary effect that we don't use often, but can come in very handy, especially if you're playing against a opponent that's not going to use a deck or not going to target a lot of things. When the monster it's equipped to is sent to the grave, you can special back a level 5 or lower fire warrior from your grave. So this is most often used as another option for Charles to equip during end phase, because if they out your Charles without getting rid of this or without banishing it instead of just sending it to the grave, suddenly this is specking back a Renaud, Renaud's grabbing back a DDR or a living fossil, or grabbing a fire warrior that's extender. We then play 3 DDR. This card is insane. It gets you back your boss monsters. It extends your combo so much. It lets you rip your opponent's hand multiple times with Omega. This plus Divine Sword is just dirty. It really is. You get a free discard and you get to put what you want to special back with DDR right there. We play 3 because we are on the Drake Gosak variant, so we have 2 power tools and we search for it. If you have an extend, or if you already have Renaud in hand or a Durandal in hand, you could also, after you get the first, just search for, or go to get the second one. So you have 66 chance of having a second DDR, so Omega rips for 3 instead of just 2. Play 1 living fossil. This is a last equipped spell extender we have. It's very useful. Some builds do run 3 instead of the 3 DDR, but I prefer it at 1 and the DDR just because DDR does more in the grind game. But it's very useful. Something you can do is you can sneak a Herald through things like Dark Ruler or Droplet Negation, because something that's negated can't be negated a second time. So Living Fossil negates the Herald while it's equipped to it. But because Herald tributes itself as cost, Herald goes to the grave, Living Fossil is no longer equipped to it, or is destroyed because you can't be equipped to something in the grave. And so Herald is no longer negated and resolves its negation normally. So this sneaks it through things like Dark Ruler and means that your opponent can't target with things like Imperm. We don't do it often, but it's a strong play. And even if they say destroy the living fossil as part of it, suddenly it banishes your Herald, so your Herald's now a target for DDR. Moving on to the rest of the equipped spells. We play 1 Noble Arms Gallatin. We do play a 41 card list, so if you're looking for something to cut to get it down to 40, this is a target. I personally think it's got a lot of uses. That 1,000 attack boost means that a red layer plus this, Aqua Dolphin can now rip a Nibiru. It also boosts just Neo Space Connector big enough to allow Aqua Dolphin to rip a Gamma when you don't start red layer and Neo Space Connector. It's another noble arm, so it's searchable with heritage, and it's a good side out option for when you're going into an opponent where that attack boost is not going to matter much. One Divine Sword. The other piece to the DDR puzzle, it is an amazing card. Something about old equipped spells are really, really fun. It's free discard fodder constantly. You might find your grave actually devoid of warriors because you use it so much. Moving on, we have Metal Silver Armor. This is an amazing tech card. It's turning off targeting your opponent, and even if you see it in your opening hand, as long as you have combo, you can just slap it on an extra monster and leave that monster there, and suddenly your opponent can't imperm you going forward, or at least as long as you're not slapping it on the monster that they want to imperm in the first place. This plus Oliver does set up that soft target or soft lock on targeting. So big thing here is it only protects against targeting one monster. So if your opponent has something that lets them target up to 2 monsters, or has something that can target anything, they can still target fine, they just can't target the monster. This is nearly a free Witten button against Virtual World, because even if you have nothing else, and you put out Charles, equip it with this and Oliver, and have Roland engrave, your opponent, you're now essentially asking your opponent, hey, do you have 2 Virtual World spells names that you can have face up this turn? If not, you're not playing. Because the second they put out a King Long or use Calhoun to put out a Chuche, you respond with Roland effect, equipped to Charles. Charles pops that, and they can't target their own monsters to special them out. So there you have a normal summon, and then they don't have options, or they're not able to use the effect to special summon. Also very useful against decks that want to banish things from your grave. If you're able to set it up first, a lot of banishing effects for grave target, so you're also protecting your grave there as well. Alright, moving on to our tech cards. We play 2 Twin Twisters. We lose hard to back row decks. If we're going second, I'm more worried about back row decks than I am playing into Virtual World or into Invoked Dogmatica, just because back row interruptions are some of the strongest interruptions in the game. You get things like torrentials and solemn strikes that you can't respond to. But it's a good card. It also, in the main, it gives us another option to get rid of our Cult Wing if we open that brick, because you can't always count on having Aqua Dolphin there to send off the Cult Wing. And if you don't send Cult Wing before the point that you have a DDR in hand, you're probably not going to combo full. You're probably to lose that match. Finally, we play 3. Jesus. Tactics. This card is absolutely amazing. It's extremely strong when you're going first, and it still has plenty of use going second. If you have an extender in hand that works, you're always going to want to choose the shuffle back effect, just because we're a deck that focuses on ripping in the first place. So even if you know, hey, that was their only hand trap left, shuffle back another piece. Leave them with no cards in hand at the end of the turn and tell them, hey, you've got 1 card to play through Charles Herald. If you don't have extenders, you're going to take the draw effect. Going second, the effect to take a monster becomes a lot more relevant there. You can take an Appaloosa or a Dragoon and use those to protect your plays going forward. I have only ever used the draw effect if looking at my hand, I got Ashed on Neospace Connector, and I opened a handful of no extenders that work at that point in time. Alright, moving on to our extra deck. 1 copy of Isolde. We'd love to play 2, but we're stuck on 1. Remember that its effect sends as cost, so if you have a tuner extender in hand still and it gets impermed or veilered on its effect to search, still send as cost. You can send your Divine Sword, you can get the rest of the equipped bricks out of the deck, and then use Divine Sword's effect to add to hand, and suddenly you have a free target for, or free discard for Oliver to special out, or a free discard for Neospace Connector if you have that option to put him out again. And you know, we use our equips, especially Divine Sword, to combo. So if you have an option to get engraved, you should. Next, we have Crystron Halka-Fibrex, not banned yet. We were hoping that the fact that Baroness came out and Cupid Pitch came out doesn't get him banned or 001 banned, but his time might be limited. Specials out the tuner. Sometimes it's worthwhile to make him even when you know you're not going all the way to your Mecha Phantom Beast or Auroradon, due to say a nib in hand or something like that. Just because its effect to banish during the main phase of your opponent's turn counts as a synchro summon. So you can synchro summon out Roland that way, and then Roland's getting you a search for a Gearfried or another extender to make your playthrough a little better. Auroradon, token fodder for synchro climbing and shenanigans. Remember that it specials out your Coltwing, and it can also pop a card. So if you open Coltwing in hand and you were able to get it engraved, you can just, at the point that you have 3 tokens out on the board and 001, make a Balmung, tribute out a token, pop the Balmung springs back the Coltwing, and suddenly you have a little off from your stuffs, but you can at least get to Charles at that point. You can probably do better depending on what else is in your grave. We play 2 Power Tool Dragons. It searches for an equip. We show 3 of the same equip and get our guaranteed combo. If you have no Divine or Durandals or Renaud in hand, you use 1 to search out a DDR and the other 1 to search out the Duradel. And then you have full combo that will end you on Charles, a Omni Negate, and 2 rips with Omega. Dracosac, we overlay Coltwing and a Power Tool to make him. It spawns out more tokens, and it's honestly a pretty strong card if your opponent leaves it on the board. You get its effect to special summon tokens is once per turn, but while it's on the field and you have a token, it cannot be destroyed by card effects. So your opponent has to make sure to clear out the token before hitting it, and a lot of the time your opponent's going to not really read into it because it's an old card, and you'll your opponent will waste a swing or a pop, and yeah. Ended up taking a match against a Drytron player because he cleared out the Herald and he cleared out leftover Warrior and left Dracosac on the field with 2 tokens, and then just set up his negate board. He's going first board. So my turn came around. I had Gearfried in hand and a way to search, or a Durandal in hand. Dracosac effect, tribute token, try to pop his Herald of Perfection, or sorry, Herald of Ultimateness before he negates. Sits there and asks me why I'm not taking it off the board. Can't be destroyed. Then use its effect to spawn out tokens, which he doesn't want me to get another free Herald, so he negates. And at that point, I put out a Durandal, and which he negates because he doesn't want me to search for anything. Leaving Gearfried in hand, Dracosac on board. We were able to special out the Gearfried, swing into something, take his Dragoon, and kill the Herald of Ultimateness. And at that point, he was left top decking, hoping for a Drytron name. Yeah, it felt real good. Balmung, another not once per turn card, so we use him twice during the main combo. He's also, remember that it's not just your opponent's effects that trigger it, so you normal combo pops him with Mechaphantic Beast Dracossack and with Charles, but you can also do things like put a DDR on him, use Gear Freed effect to send the DDR to when your opponent's playing, and then suddenly you're spawning out Occult Wing tokens and 001 on their turn. Other big thing note, if you're playing to Lancia, he's suddenly live under Living Fossil again because he'll get destroyed, go to a grave because he can't be banished, and you have a, he's able to activate his effect at that point. Play one copy of the Shooting Riser. Level modulation, remember that you don't always just have to send the red layer, you can send an Aqua Dolphin if you weren't able to put it out. So then it becomes a 4-star. So a 5-star plus it equals Charles, or another 4-star with it equals your Omega. But remember, you have plenty of targets. You have 1-star targets, you have a 2-star target, you have a 3-star target. So there's options. Next, Infernoble Knight. Captain Roland, he's a search, he's how Charles gets a pop during your opponent's turn. Very strong card. It's interesting how little people will try to hit this engrave and just leave it, because they rather get rid of the 001 so I don't do more things next turns, but leave the interruption for that turn. Remember that you don't have to make him at the Draco step either. You can make him with a leftover, not a Neo-Space Connector, sorry, Aqua Dolphin, and a Gemba that you special out with Isolde. He's still a tuner, so you can still make Alka Fibrax after that, but suddenly you don't have to go through Shooting Riser necessarily to do it. And then he's a tuner that you can special out with DDR, and suddenly you're already at level 5. Next we have Charles, our extra deck boss monster. He's amazing. He sets up the soft target lock. He's an insane field presence. Bringing him back with DDR is a pop right away, which actually won me a match. Remember that he doesn't target, so make sure your opponents know that they have to activate in response to his activation before you say what you're going to destroy. We play 2 Heralds. Not a lot of people are on the double Herald, but I like the option of being able to make one before committing to the rest of combo, because it's another anti-Nibiru option. It's a, hey, when I rip with Aqua Dolphin, that thing's getting banished, not even going to grave. It's a good target for spec back with Living Fossil because of reasons we mentioned before, and honestly, sometimes it's worth it to just leave it on field and force your opponent to waste their battle phase to clear that interruption, because they can't play through Foolishing from hand, discarding from monsters from hand to grave is banished, and discarding from deck to grave is banished. So your opponents that are playing Tri-Brigade, or sometimes even Drytron, are going to have to use their battle phase to clear the Herald so they can play normally, and suddenly you know you're going to have a turn to swing back with Gear Freed or an Odd Search. You can probably take that game, unless they set a board you can't clear. One copy of Psyframe Lord Omega. He does insane things. If you're playing a person that tells you to go first, this card can just carry you on its back. The deck is focused on hand ripping. We cycle him back with DDR. If you're playing against Shadal Invoke Dogmatica, remember that he's a great target to send because he can shuffle himself back, and his effect to shuffle himself back is not a once per turn effect. So you can use it to force the schism and force the window onto the field, and then just shuffle him back with the other card that you sent, or target something else in their grave that they want to stay there. Finally, outside of combo, we play One Nightmare Unicorn. It's useful in situations where you just need to get something out of there without destroying it. And his other main use is in conjunction with Access Code Talker. These two together, plus the Gearfried Renaud, means that your turn 3 you can swing direct, usually, for more than 8k. And your opponent's needs an Imperm or Effect Veiler to stop you from clearing it. And Effect Veiler might not do it because you can easily have an equip on Gearfried. If you can't play the Access Code Talker, other things work, but he's just so much better than the other options, unfortunately. Hopefully, with his reprint, more people can get him in their decks. Finally, we're going to move on to the side deck. Starting with our 3 Fs, we do play 3 Lancia. So yes, I have a crappy gold rare. It's good against Tri-Brigade. It's going to be useful going forward against VW, against, I believe it will be useful against Flunderies. But I still have to see how a little more how that deck functions. Yeah, it's a useful card. It's also another level 5 target when you're going first, just so you can send it and keep a red layer in deck, which is very important because red layer is usually a side out target, down to 2. We do play 3 Nibiru. Got to keep those hero players in check. It's good against a lot of decks. It's only, sometimes you're just not going to be able to play it because you know your opponent's going to get to an Apo or negation instead. But we like high impact hand traps just because we have so few spaces for them. Moving on, we play 3 copies of Droplets. We have discard fodder. We do have a 1-card combo with Neospace Connector that gets you to Charles Herald pop, and depending on how you play it, you can even sometimes put a Gearfried out too. We use this instead of Dark Ruler because we don't want a very long drawn out match. It also works as a going second card in the odd situation where you're siding for second and get told to go first. Remember that when it sends cards to the grave, it's for its effect to prevent responses. It counts what they originally are in grave. So if you can freely send a Ogier that's equipped to Charles and the equip spell that you equip to Charles, and for 2 negations, and you've stopped response with monsters and spells, because even though you sent 2 equip spells off the field.
Because Konami said so.
Yep. Now moving on to the remainder, we actually have some interesting ratios. We play 2 Evenlies. It's for the control matchup, but also a lot of decks don't put up Omni Negates right now. Drytron of course does, but you're not seeing an Omni Negate out of a hero board. You're not going to see an Omni Negate out of a VW board. You're not going to see it out of a Tri-Brigade board. I've come to the realization that Tri-Brigade, it's usually not worth it because they'll just keep the Revolt, and sometimes that's enough if they know where to stop you. But if they're playing a more control-heavy variant, it puts in a lot of work then. Then we have 2 infinite impermanences. It's a good side-in option when we usually side out the two Twin Twisters when we know that your opponent's not playing a back row deck. It's effect negation, it's strong, it's paired with droplets. It's a little ridiculous because you can get 2 negates for 2 cards in hand. Finally, we have 2 one-ofs. We have 1 more copy of Immortal Phoenix Gearfried. Don't have a second collector's rare, probably not going to invest in a second one, but when you're going second, seeing him in the starting hand is amazing. You can take him or leave him going first, and sometimes it's actually bad to see him going first, which is why we only play the 1 copy in the main, but going second, you really want to see him because he can ward clear after you've devoted the rest of your resources to just trying to play. You can drop him, kill one of the interruptions with an attack and take the other one, and suddenly you're in a simplified game state and all with a monster negate. And then for our last card, it's a tech choice by mine, but we're playing a game with time limit. It still increases attack, so it still does fun things with red layer, being able to beat over a window. It still gets a Neospace Connector big enough so that you can rip a Gamma from hand, but also it lets you gain life points. So if your opponent's on Dark Ruler to break your board, they're probably losing that match now because you go into your turn with, or go into their turn with 800 or 8,500. It can chain block your Isolde effect to search. Gelt can do the same. It's also just something you don't have to see it in your opening hand. You can just, at the end of your combo, instead of getting back a DDR with Renaud, you grab this with Caliburn, you still rip one from hand and have an Omni Negate and a pop, but you also are up 500 and Charles is up to 35, even if you don't equip a monster from the deck.
All right. Well then, yeah, he's been doing really well with this, actually. It's actually been hell on earth trying to face it with this thing right lately. But anyway, I hope you guys all enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions, leave it down in the comment section below. And also thank you, Josh, for the very in-depth detail and everything. It's really much appreciated for anyone who is new to this deck and just trying to learn different little intricacies about it, because it is kind of complicated in a lot of ways. But anyway, I hope you guys all enjoy this. Leave a like, comment, definitely subscribe. We shall see you guys next video. Have a nice day.